Hello. Welcome to the In Love with Business podcast. This miniseries is titled Chief Sustainability Heroes and is hosted by Professor Paolo Melina and Marlena Corvalia-Shore from University College London, School of Management. Throughout this series, we will talk to sustainability leaders from different organizations and sectors to learn about their sustainability journeys. We will ask them about their career paths, the challenges they encountered in implementing complex strategies of sustainable transformation, and what inspired them along the way. We will also ask what advice they would offer to aspiring chief sustainability officers. Enjoy the episode.
In today's episode, we are pleased to welcome Mark Mclane, leading social sustainability expert and the current head of global diversity, inclusion and well-being for M&G. M&G is a leading international savings and investment business that has been operating for more than 175 years. And today the company has got more than 7 million customers globally. In his role as the head of global diversity, inclusion and well-being for M&G, Mark is responsible for architecting a firm-wide diversity and inclusion strategy that leverages the company's organizational strengths while ensuring it remains nimble in this ever-changing global business climate. Prior to M&G, Mark held the positions of Chief Diversity Officer at Barclays, Director of Diversity and Inclusion for Booz Allen Hamilton, and Chief Diversity Officer for the Whirlpool Corporation. Adding to his extensive global business experience, Mark holds various leadership roles, including being a trustee for the Diana Award, chair of the Social Sustainability Committee of the International Business and Diplomatic Exchange, a member of the Association of British Insurers, their board subcommittee, and a former commissioner for the UK Equalities and Human Rights Commission, and past master of the Guild of Human Resource Professionals. Mark, what a background. You're going to tell us more in a second.
I feel tired hearing that.
But it's a pleasure to have you in our show, Mark. And I'm particularly pleased because you are also a friend, so it makes it special. But I guess it would be nice, Mark, if you can tell, maybe give some color to this biography I just read for our audience.
Yeah. So Paolo Melina, thank you for having me. First of all, the only thing we left out, Paolo, was how did I become the Chief Diversity Officer at Whirlpool and why? All right. The first 20 years of my career was sales and marketing, both domestic in the US and internationally. And it was with my work at Whirlpool where I realized that there was a disconnect with D&I between HR and the business. Right? We were specifically talking about the war on talent, which I agreed with then and still agree today that that's a driving factor. But it can't be the only factor. The work around diversity, inclusion, and well-being has to be a benefit to us delivering our business. It was at Whirlpool where I asked Jeff Fettig, the CEO, why we weren't taking all of the work we knew about market segmentation as a consumer products goods company and coupling that with the war on talent and broadening our business case, really showing the business why this is so important. And that as colleagues, we should reflect that customer base because it brings the knowledge in-house. And his response to me was, I don't know why we don't do that. Help me. Right? Because it was the first time the question was answered. And that's what sparked my interest in this work. And that's how I moved from Whirlpool through to defense contracting, and then Barclays called and recognized it was a huge opportunity within financial services. And now to M&G, quite honestly, because I look at this work over a period of 5 to 7 years, putting a 5-year strategy in place, making sure it's sustainable, making sure that it's embedding in the work of the organization I had done at Barclays. And when I got the call from G, there were a couple of factors. One was we were demerging from Prudential, which was exciting, becoming the oldest new FTSE 100 company at the time, right? Right, because we're a couple of 100 years old and we're just going to be a FTSE 100 company for the first time and really setting up this practice. I came as the head of diversity and inclusion. I became the head of diversity and inclusion and well-being because I saw an opportunity to not have a separate and distinct well-being strategy, but to start to think about well-being as a driver to inclusion. And I know we're going to go into more depth, but that's really how I got here, but why I'm here today.
And I guess if you want, the label of social sustainability leader is I guess a very nice label. But I would like to ask you, what that means, to you, and really what inspired you to, I guess, develop a career and make an impact in this field of work.
Yeah, it's really taking an inside-out viewpoint. Okay. If the work is only structured internally, you've missed 50% of the importance of this work. Right. And that's not just the outward view toward our customers and assisting our business in understanding a more diverse client base, but it's also looking at community. And what I find interesting is that many of my contemporaries that I talk to think, but that's someone else's responsibility in CSR, or that's someone else's responsibility in other parts of sustainability or ESG. It may be their accountability from a role standpoint, but I take on the responsibility of getting us all to the table. Okay. Really looking at the entire ecosystem that we as an organization have to work with, and how does that have a broader impact in the community? How does the work my counterpart within our CSR group is doing around mentoring young men and women in schools provide an opportunity for our early careers group to bring in apprentices and interns to help influence young men and women going to university into our graduate program? That's really the social sustainability piece for me. We're looking at our diversity strategy of building a diverse pipeline over time and having a positive impact in the community and being a bit unapologetic, right? Of also breaking down the barriers and the biases to financial services with certain socioeconomic groups, certain ethnic groups, right, who may be further away from financial services than others. That's the social sustainability piece for me. It's the overall change, not just the change in our pipeline by bringing in graduates. It's how are we having a positive effect in the community that's shifting, right, an entire generation's perception and opportunity within financial services in a way we've never done before.
Great. So M&G, it's obviously a very big international organization. And when you think about your role as head of diversity and inclusion, can you tell us a little bit more about how, what does that role look like? How do you describe it? And also how are you integrating it across an organization as big as M&G?
So I look at myself, and yesterday I was corrected, I'll tell you about this. I look at myself as an architect, okay? Not necessarily delivering the work, but architecting the work with our board of directors, our executive committee, really understanding and helping the organization understand what is it we're trying to achieve. And then influencing the mechanisms across the organization to embed the work, right? So having a smaller team and being truly a center of expertise and not a delivery mechanism, right, is a forcing mechanism in a positive way to make certain that across HR, we're looking at every aspect of talent management. And are we considering diversity and inclusion and brand impact through that entire cycle? Are we holding our senior leaders accountable, right, to drive to those goals that we have set around women in leadership, around ethnic minority in leadership? And then also that component I said about being an influencer to bring the other components to the table to say, as we're doing this, how are we keeping in mind the community? That's my role. Now, someone said to me, I say an architect because I think of an architect as they sit down with you and they design the house you want, right? And then they work with the builder and they work with the trades to deliver the house that you want. And when there's questions, the content expertise. Someone said to me, yesterday at a seminar, no, you're more like a conductor. And I would say, I think that's another
good one.
good metaphor, right? Is we have all these people doing with their own expertise. How do we bring that together to deliver a final product? And for me, I need to be the one who's doing the horizon scanning, right? I need to be the one who's keeping up with changes in regulation and then making certain, right? We're working with our government affairs group and bringing expertise to those conversations, meeting with some government officials at the moment, right? Through some of the consultations around ethnicity pay gap reporting and disability pay gap reporting, and bringing the organizational view and constraints and support to the government in equal measure to move the work forward. And this is where I say my role, if constructed properly, should be an inside out view, right? I'm in the market enough to bring this information back to my board of directors and our executive committee. And I can be a spokesperson for our positioning in those meetings, right? In lieu of your CEO or your CFO or your chief human resources officer always having to be present. It's a complex role, right? If done right. For me, the methodology sits behind a simple formula, and that is diversity and inclusion should equal business impact. And that's how I think of all the work I do. What am I doing to have a positive impact on our business? And that goes from what we just talked about with understanding regulation, understanding the broader geopolitical landscape, right down to how can I help colleagues deliver to some of our investors and our clients who want to know what we're doing around diversity and inclusion. It's a very broad role. And I like to say it's the best job in the organization because I get to be in so many different parts of our business.
Right. And that connection to business impact, actually, I think that it's a perfect segue to our next question, which, so in preparation for our discussion today, we had a quick look at, your website and some of the sustainability messaging you have there, and specifically around your diversity and inclusion strategy. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to read like a brief statement from there, and then we just wanted to delve a little bit further into that. So you say that you don't just do what's right for your colleagues because it's right. You do it because it also unleashes potential, drives innovation, and ultimately improves business performance and client delivery. So can you tell us a little bit more about, what you're doing around your D&I strategy that is directly related to driving that business impact that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I'll start from the culture standpoint, right? And that is, if I say this is what your experience should be like at M&G, that you can be yourself and bring your whole self to work. If you come to M&G and that brand promise is not the brand experience that you have, you're probably going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the experience you have, then you're spending less time covering who you are and more time present in meetings, more time benefiting, right? So look, you've Googled me, and people probably will Google me after they see this and they'll find out that I'm gay. Okay. I've been out since I was about 20 or 32, I think. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to be yourself, being able to talk about my husband, Carlos, when I talk to our graduates and our incoming interns, you can see how that releases energy in the room because I don't have to be guarded about what I say and who I am. That's the release of the innovation. If I'm spending my time covering, I'm not spending my time in a meeting with Paolo talking about what might be the next thing. I'm watching what I'm saying, right? I'm filtering. And look, I talk about it from the standpoint of being gay. We can also talk about it from the standpoint of being neurodiverse, okay? And not necessarily being open with or feel like you can be open with your line manager about what gives you the best tools to deliver the best. And we have colleagues who've told their story about their ADHD and needing quiet time, okay, to be able to process. And a team went out and bought one of our colleagues Bose noise canceling headset. And he told the story about how that just absolutely changed his ability during the day to not have to book a room or go to a quiet room, but could stay at his desk, right? It's having these open dialogues that unleashes this conversation. Now, you could say to me, that sounds great. Give me an example. So I can give you a couple. When I was at Barclays, I had a couple of colleagues who wanted to do workshops around mental health, and we did. And they came to me and they said, we need to do more. It was really well received. And I asked them what their true intention was. What was the impact they wanted to have? And they said they wanted to change the dialogue about mental health in the workplace. I said, that's not a few workshops.
Yes.
That's a cultural shift, a societal shift, right?
Yeah.
But I think we should strive for that. Okay. And I said to them, go away and think about what would you do over the next 12 to 18 months that would begin this conversation. And out of that came what we called at Barclays the This Is Me campaign. And it was 6 colleagues who told their story on video about how they manage their mental health and well-being at Barclays. We then shared that with Dame Fiona Woolf, who was the Lord Mayor of London at the time, at her Power of Diversity breakfast. That is now a national movement sponsored by the Lord Mayor's Appeal in the UK that has over 800 companies as a part of the This Is Me campaign, right?
Amazing.
There's an example of unleashing, right, resource, thinking innovatively, okay? That's having a positive impact societally. The flip side to that is here at M&G, some of my colleagues came and they said to me 2 years ago, I think it is now, maybe even 3, they wanted to produce an impact fund that was based on diversity and inclusion. Listen, in full transparency, the next thing I said was, I don't know what an impact fund is.
Educate me.
Listen, I know my limitations.
Yeah.
But the experts were at the table. And what they were asking me is, will you help guide us so that the criteria for this fund, we can stand and say, yes, we do this at M&G. So we're looking at investing in other companies based on our own proof points, right? Not more, actually in some instances, a bit less, to help companies move. And it's now an impact fund in Europe. So you can influence the business in positive ways.
By the way, I think this is the point for me to brag a little bit and say that our research on impact investing last year was awarded by the Financial Times.
It's wonderful.
No, this is a super interesting, how you are really, connecting the dots between the topic of inclusion, the topic of innovation, of impact. And I guess that these are at the end ingredients for share value creation. As you correctly said, at the end, yes, I guess people are going to be more happy at the workplace. You maybe transform an organization potentially that has got a ripple effect on other organizations in the same industry. But at the end, you build a better society, which is a really a fantastic outcome. I guess if I can jump here, Mark, and ask you, what is I guess the challenging side of things, right? I mean, what you describe makes a lot of sense to me. But then the reality is that organizations are hard to change. Not always you deal with visionary leaders in business organizations. So I guess barriers exist to, I guess, implement these type of visions that you described. So can you talk a little bit about, the most significant, I guess, challenges that you normally find in organizations today, and what is your strategy to address?
Yeah. So the first thing you have to realize is this work is the long term, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're talking about societal shift, right? We're talking about individual impact, right? Of convincing Mark Mclane why this is good from a business standpoint. And not every leader is there, right? But when I introduce something new to an organization, I work on the bell curve, right? That most chief marketing officers work on. And that is, I look at that first 8 to 10% as my early adopters, right? When you introduce a new product, or Apple comes out with the new phone and the only thing they've changed is the camera. I want those people who are willing to wait in line, right? Who get excited about the idea, who get excited about an initiative, get them to start to help me shift the organization. And that happens over time. You have to have a consistent and concise approach that has to be coupled with a consistent and ongoing communications approach. Most of the failings in this space are we launch something and then a year later we turn in, but nobody's doing anything with it. And my question then is, well, how have you told people about it? How have you repeatedly put it in front of them, invited them in, got them excited, shown them the proof points of by doing X, our colleagues are saying Y and Z. You have to build the whole mechanism. Just because we build it, it doesn't mean it's going to organically take shape and move forward. I've had senior leaders not invite me to leadership meetings after they've met me. It's happened more than once, and I've let them go. Okay? Because the architecture that's in place is built for a leadership team. I don't own it. Our CEO owns it. So if there's someone on an executive committee who's just like, I have other things to do, I don't have time for this, you have maybe 8 or 10 other people to work with. And when you start to show impact, okay, organizationally, people are competitive. You don't sit at the top table without being a bit competitive. Yeah. And when your colleagues start to show results and your boss is wondering why you're not, I don't have to ask those questions. This is the importance of taking a strategic approach and then enabling the organizational mechanisms to take hold, right? And then I've seen the shift where those senior leaders have sometime, in one case, 2 years, it took them to call me.
Interesting.
Right. And he finally called me. He was like, Mark, I'd really like to revisit that conversation. Not only did he not ask me, he wouldn't allow me to meet with his leadership team. And I said, okay, you have to move on. You have to look in an organization, where are you going to have impact? And then how do you scale that impact? I go back to that bell curve. How do you take that first 10 or 15% and get to 20, to 25? And then once you hit that 50, right, the organization sort of takes over itself. I was once asked by the head of HR at Whirlpool, David Binkley, said to me, Mark, how will you know you're being successful in this role? And I said, David, when I stop asking to be included in senior leader meetings and senior leaders are calling me, we'll have gone from a push strategy to a pull. That will be an indication that we're having a positive impact in the organization.
Yeah, that's a good, proxy and metaphor. I guess something, as you know, Mark, in this podcast, we interview sustainability leaders from predominantly very large global organizations. And I guess speaking of challenges, many of them, for example, in the context of environmental agendas, for example, in relation to decarbonization targets or the development of more circular business models, they have basically referred to the challenge of dealing with different basically regulation in different countries and regions of the world. And I'm wondering if that type of challenge is also relevant when you are in the D&I space. Is that something that you experience, or is not valid for that?
No, you absolutely have to have an understanding that having a global strategy has to be nimble enough to be able to be then applied at the local level, right? Because of regulation, because of in-country employment law, and also societal expectations have to be taken into account. So what's a great example of that? As we were implementing our HR system, I insisted that we have disability and LGBTQ self-identification everywhere in the world, that it is legal. And with that comes some bias in country. Where one country said, oh, we can't legally collect this data. And I said, that's fine. Send me the legislation because I'd like to see it and understand it. And then it came back was, well, we can't ask it of candidates. I said, okay. Can you ask it of incoming employees as part of onboarding? Yes.
Mhm.
Well, then that's what we'll do. So I tend to unpick, right? If someone sends me the legislation, great. If they don't send me the legislation, then I unpick and I keep asking the questions to get to the root. Because then it was said, we don't know if we're ready. And I said, well, you're M&G, we're ready. This is our global position, right? That's how you start to shift, right? The regionality of this work from a societal standpoint, aligning with regulation, aligning with legislation, but shifting some of the societal bias, right? To say, but our values are these, and we apply those consistently around the world. And then I have to be ready, right? At times, I will tell you, I've been called out when I was at Whirlpool with legislation in Uganda. And it was on the intranet that myself and then Anna Duarte McCarthy at the time, who was the chief diversity officer at Citi, around the LGBTQ legislation. This is a few years ago. We addressed it from an organizational standpoint. We supported our colleagues in country. So we didn't try to helicopter in the solution, but we made certain that they were supported on the ground, okay, and that we could deliver in country. That's the approach you have to take. The solution doesn't come from London. The support
comes from London.
Exactly.
And do you recognize, for example, Mark, any countries being particularly advanced with their D&I frameworks?
Yeah, I would say the UK is.
The UK.
In a lot of ways. The US is in a lot of ways. And then it's interesting, right? I moved to the UK 14 years ago, immediately was in number 10, working on marriage equality and the LGBT community, which superseded the US. They followed. I think the US is further along on legislation and recognition of age bias.
Interesting.
Right? And that's because of the AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. I think we're further behind and running to catch up in the UK as we recognize that our population is aging, right? But there's different societal factors for that. In the UK, because we have socialized medicine, people retiring at 55 or 60 was the norm. That was never the norm in the US. That's also changing in the UK. So it's difficult to say one country or one region is ahead. They're ahead in some respects and behind on others, right? And I think this goes back to your question about recognizing how you deploy a global strategy is you have to recognize what's the work that needs to be done in Singapore is different than India, is different than the US or the UK.
And the strategy tailors to those differences. It's interesting. And Mark, just to switch direction a little bit, but wanted to delve a little bit more into, when we talk about sustainable transformation, it's obviously very interconnected with digital transformation. So at M&G, how are you leveraging technology? So, whether it's AI or other, how are you leveraging that to, again, truly integrate D&I into your systems? Like you talked about your HR systems, but systematically across your organization.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I love our technology group.
Okay.
I absolutely love them. Look, the tech team is one of the first groups I get to know because they're part of everything we do every single day. And because of that,
because you need data.
You need data, but also just because of the technology we're using today. As we shifted to Office 365, working with the technology team, I said to them, look, I'm a part of this organization, I know Office 365, and I know it's based, the new version has a lot of capability based on accessibility. And they're like, yes. I said, when we get done rolling it out, all the new laptops, let's think about how we start to inform colleagues about this. And we came up with workshops called Technology for All. Because if we had called them accessible technology workshops, only certain group would show up. By calling them accessible technology for all, it explored all of these new capabilities Office 365 had that were based on accessibility, but that wasn't the intent of the workshops. The workshops were to get everyone else in. And I had one colleague come to me right at the start. She went through the pilot and she said, Mark, I don't tell people I'm dyslexic and dyspraxic. She said, but now I know that Office 365 has email readback capability. And I said to her, tell me what that does for you. She said, I don't have to agonize over sending emails now to senior leaders because I can listen to them. She said, it would take me hours. This goes back to the productivity and innovation question earlier, right? By unleashing the power of the technology we have, okay? Again, it doesn't happen organically. You have to get people to step through it, has made an impact for so many colleagues, where before they would have thought, I need to have a workplace adjustment. Now they're finding out actually the technology exists. The capability of having voice to text, all built into Teams and built into Microsoft Office today. We now have that technology built into our auditorium. So it's all interconnected, but someone has to be the driving force behind this because no one just turns the switch on. The other is from the standpoint of AI, right? Copilot, with a group of colleagues who identify as being neurodiverse at M&G. They were the testing group to see what would work and what would not work. And it's this partnership I have with our technology group. They came to me and they said, we're thinking about it this way. They were like, what do you think? I said, I think you should ask the colleagues if they're interested. Tell them why you think they're the right group to test this product. And because of that now, Copilot is rolling out across the whole of M&G.
Nice.
Right. But you have to build these partnerships, right? You have to leverage the excitement, right? And then also sometimes the excitement from my side, that team comes and goes, we want to pilot Teams apps. We're going to redo this for you. And my boss says, how did you get that done? Right? You have to build those relationships. And for me, technology is the driver for all of what we just said around workplace adjustment, even when you don't know you need one. And I'm a recipient of that. I not only found out I can make my cursor larger, I found out that I could have it automatically change color. And for me, when you're using 2 or 3 screens, I was constantly losing it. Well, that was built out of visual impairment, right? Addressing, but it works for me. I worked with a leader, and I'll leave you with this, that once said to me, Mark, a solution for one is a solution for many. But you have to tell them about it, or they don't know it exists.
Starts with one. That's very powerful.
But that's the innovation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's the one person saying, if that cursor worked slightly more this way, it would benefit me. Well, it's not going to just benefit me. It's going to benefit you. That's innovation. That's why it's important to unleash it.
It's amazing. And it speaks to why this is also, sustainability is also described as a journey, because we're always learning, right? And that's part of the innovation, learning and applying. So speaking of journey, obviously every journey has its ups and downs, and we touched on some of the challenges that, related to D&I and sustainability in general. But how do you stay motivated? So when you encounter those barriers along the way, or, those senior leaders who don't return your calls, let's say, but how do you stay motivated and keep going, and then also keep your team motivated on this journey?
So for me, there's 2 real motivators. One is with the current macro or geopolitical environment, right? Being able to reassure the board of directors, the executive committee, that we're watching, here's how we're positioned as an organization, right? And for them to be able to turn around with confidence and say, thank you, let's move on. That motivates me, right? Even more motivating is when I have a colleague stop me or send me an email and say, because of this, I can now or I would stay at M&G. We have an internal mobility program, and one of the colleagues who went into it said to me, I was thinking about leaving M&G. He said, now I'm telling everybody they need to come to work at M&G. That motivates me to keep going, right?
Yeah.
It's the individual impact. And I go back to that. If that one person felt that way, then there's a few more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when it gets hard, right? And this is difficult work because we're affecting social change in a positive way. I just go back to that one person who said this, or the one person who stepped forward to tell their story to help someone else because they trust this organization. How can you not get out of bed and do it again?
And let me maybe ask you two more questions, Mark. The first one is, I guess you alluded to a very, complex macro environment, the geopolitical context. And I guess this is happening at a time where, as a society, we do face some big challenges. Of course, inclusion is one of them, but, we need to address poverty. We need to address a changing climate. I guess there is an entire summary with the SDG agenda of big problems that we have in society. And I guess I want to ask you, are you generically speaking optimistic about the future and the role that companies, can play to create a better world?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic, right? I think points of challenge give you the opportunity to step back and reflect, okay? Or did I see it coming? If I didn't see it coming, am I helping this organization position correctly for the future? What has to change? And what's the next fight, right? What's the next challenge? I am optimistic because you can look at different points in history where this work has pivoted, okay? Mm-hmm. Where this work has been challenged, but we continue onward. And I think that has to be a motivating factor, right? You have to be able to look at, I have a responsibility in the current geopolitical environment to understand there are a multitude of changes, both positive and negative, happening at once, right? There's legislation happening that looks both positive and potentially negative for different groups in the UK. How are we going to address that, right? There's a raft of legislation coming out of Europe for the first time around equal pay, right? And reporting. And that's a positive move forward that wouldn't even be thought of 20 years ago that we're looking at today. And then how do you make certain in those countries where potentially being gay, you can still be jailed? It's a balance, right? It's a balance. But every time we make a positive change, there's a positive ripple effect. And I do think, right? I know that organizations, right, are who influence government as much as government influences organizations. Equal marriage didn't happen because the government pushed it forward. It happened because organizations pushed it forward in both the US and the UK, because it started with domestic partner benefits, right, for organizations who didn't have to, and it progressed over time. That's how I look at it. Organizations today have as great a responsibility as ever because society is constantly changing. And the change within, right, then does have a positive effect externally because I take it home with me, okay? That's that one, it's sort of the marketing to the market of one mentality, right? If you help to continue to shift thinking, okay, and societal change one person at a time, it grows scale over time.
Absolutely. And the last question is this one, Mark. We know that this podcast is followed by young people, students, individuals who may be aspiring to a career similar to yours, but more generically speaking, aspiring to becoming a social sustainability leader of some kind. So what type of advice you wanted to share with them?
Yeah, so to be a social sustainability leader, you don't have to work in the sustainability team. That's the first step. That's one career avenue. right? So when people come to me and they say, Mark, I'd love to work more in your space, I talk to them about their role. I talk to them about being a leader and embedding this work and the influence they can have in their role, okay, as much as working in a center of excellence. So look at both avenues. If this is the work you want to do, how do you couple that with the work you love to do? For me, look, I said it early in the beginning of this podcast that I started in sales and marketing. I tell everyone I'm still in sales and marketing. And I am, right? Because I have to sell the product.
Yeah.
And the marketing is I've got to get people to adopt it. I still have the same skill set I always had. It's applied to a different product.
Yeah.
Right?
You're a chief influencer.
You're absolutely right. So I always give that advice to go and take a look and think about how can you have a focus on social sustainability in your role today. Let me help you craft that first to even get started, right? Because that's where the work has a sustainability component, okay, that I'm hoping to help influence, right? Because it becomes part of our business. It becomes part of our delivery. It becomes you talking to clients about this work, not bringing Mark Mclane in. For others who want to become a social sustainability expert, work in this field, I would say get started as soon as you get to an organization, right? I started with working in a employee resource group, talking to the business, working with CSR, right? Building a bit of competency and understanding of the business simultaneously, that when I made the shift, I could make it with some confidence.
Nice.
Great advice.
Mark, it was really, a pleasure to have you in our show, and thank you for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and vision for, I guess, building better organizations. And, congratulations not only for the work you are doing at M&G, but for really the impact and scale of the initiatives you developed over the years. Thank you very much, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you both for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, we invite you to like and share this episode on your social media. Enjoy the rest of your day.